Hey painting pals! Welcome back to Mandy's Minis. I've been waiting a long time to say this. This video is sponsored by Crydruffy. Crydruffy is the all-in-one painting system, but more on that later. First, let me show you mine. So, I've had this for about 1.5 years, and as you can see, it is well loved, meaning, yeah, kind of gross. Sorry, I'm a messy painter. Today we're talking about palettes, and this system has some of the best. So, paint cups, brush holders, and here are the palettes. So on top you can see I've got the paper. It holds it nicely for the wet palette. Unhook them. Over here we have storage space, which can also be used as a well palette. Today I'm going to talk about the benefits of this in particular and why this fabulous wet palette that you always hear about might actually be holding you back as a painter. So, from the minute you started painting, as soon as you kind of got into this community, you heard you got to get a wet palette. It's going to make things so much easier, so much better. I've done it. I've said it. But I've also discovered that that may not be the best advice for a newbie. Let me tell you why. First, the benefits of the wet palette is designed to keep your paint wet so that it lasts for a full session. If you're lucky, you can get it into your next session. I've had some of them last for a week sometimes because the consistency was held so nicely. But that's a bonus. Don't actually expect your wet palette to produce that result. It's not always going to happen. It's only designed to make it last longer than it would if you weren't using it. How it works is the water from the sponge comes up through the paper and keeps the paint wet. But what that also does, it thins your paint right there on the palette, which is great because you don't have to really focus on thinning it as much. So yeah, that's definitely a benefit when you're first starting and you don't know how to thin your paints properly. But here's the thing, do you ever actually learn that if you're relying on the tool to do it for you? Well, the downsides of the wet palette, I just kind of told you one. It also, at least in my experience, does not do well with metallics. The water tends to, I don't know, kind of thin it a little too much, and then the pigments start showing, and it's just not as good. So I never use a wet palette for my metallics. Same thing for my inks. Inks are thinner than actual paint, so it doesn't work as well on the wet palette, but it does offer fantastic vibrancy. So I really love it for the vibrancy on the inks. Also, same kind of goes with your contrast paints, speed paints. You know, those are already thinner to begin with. So once you put it on the wet palette and the extra water is getting in, you're thinning it even more. And it's not really doing it the way it's supposed to be used. So not every painter uses those the way they're intended to be used. They use them for other things, glazes, and you know, I do that too. That's kind of the plus and minus of the wet palette. Well palette, which most of you probably are more familiar with this type of well palette, but Crydruffy was nice enough to sponsor me, so we're going to use theirs today. The well palette kind of does the exact opposite. So it doesn't wet the paints, so they do dry however quickly they're going to dry in your area. If you live in a more humid area, it might take a little longer for the paints to actually dry out than if you live in a dry area. There's also temperature and all sorts of other things that can factor into your environment and how your paints are actually behaving. Now, these are great because the well holds more liquid paint. You're able to use that to thin these. When I was back at GaryCon, I actually didn't bring my travel kit. And that's because GaryCon is more D&D based than, say, Adepticon or anything else specifically miniature painting or miniature related for conventions. but I knew I did want to paint. I actually did take my painting kit. It was in my hotel room, but I didn't bring it actually into GaryCon. So when I was painting at the Army Painter booth, we were using well palettes so that we could actually paint up our figures. That actually got me thinking, because in the paint and take section, there were other Army painters that weren't just contrast paints. Army Painter calls them speed paints. Same concept, execution's a little different, slightly, but we'll go into that another time. That's a whole nother video. As I was using them, manually thinning and adjusting, I was actually finding it a little more difficult to create glazes, to create the effects I wanted, because I had less control over the paint using the well palette. But that got me thinking, how many of us have trouble with glazing? I know it took me forever to learn how to create a glaze consistency. One of the things you always hear in miniature painting is, okay, well, how much do I thin them? That's always the first question when you're learning, and okay, I've got to thin my paints. How much? How much water do I add? And the answer is, it depends. Or maybe you hear one of those, tried and true rules of thumb, like, oh, skim milk consistency, or whatever that might be. Well, they're not exactly helpful tips. The answer is, it depends. And a lot of that comes into play with your environment, like I had touched on a few minutes ago. How do you actually take that into account and actually learn the proper consistencies? Why, I actually kind of proved to myself when I was forced to only use a well palette that you don't actually learn a lot of these things for quite some time, and until you were forced to. For a long time, I actually relied on glaze medium to create glazes because I could not get the consistency myself. A lot of people also use prepackaged washes. I myself use Agrax all the time. Your Nuln oil, those are all washes, and they're very good ones. That's why I use them, but you have to buy them. So learning how to actually thin the paints yourself and being able to do it with just your paint and your water is a much more cost-effective way of painting. Plus, then you're learning about the paint and about the consistency so that you can know how to manipulate it to get the results you want. That's why experience matters. You can feel the difference when you're painting, depending on what your consistency is, if you know what you're looking for, if you've been painting long enough for that. If you haven't, don't worry, you'll get there. You can do it. But when I first started painting, and we were talking about the brush, and somebody mentioned that, oh, you can feel when your brush is starting to dry out. I thought that seemed kind of strange, but a month or two went by and it's like, wait a minute, I actually do. I know my brush is dry. I have to, add more water to it. I know how to do this now. It clicked in my head. That's just something that comes with experience and with use. Again, the paint consistencies and all of that, you have to get that experience. Is your wet palette holding you back from actually learning those things? Learning to manipulate the paint. Learning to feel the difference in the consistency. Let's find out today, because we're going to do a little challenge. I am going to paint up my very pretty bust here using only the Crydrufi well palette, and we'll see how she looks at the end. And if even me, a painter who's been doing this for quite some time, I do commissions, I do tutorials, teach it, what can I learn from using a well palette that I haven't already talked about? Let's find out. So what did I learn from this? Well, I learned that I made my glaze too thin. Also, sometimes my layer paint got a little too thick. I tend to rely very heavily on that wet palette and it doing most of the thinning for me. The whole point of painting and the way that you become a better painter is to learn more about the paint, how it works, and how to apply it. So it's a good way to actually practice that. Now I'm gonna be honest, you see me do just a couple quick glazes, not even enough to fully blend the model here, but I did make up a batch of glaze outside of a wet palette so that I could do the airbrush glazing instead, just because with such a large figure, it was just taking too long for me to get through it. Other than that, I still finished just fine. Okay, we're gonna take a time out right here. I have to tell you about today's sponsor, Crydrufi. They are amazing. This system is fantastic. The company is fantastic. I absolutely love working with them. They got in touch with me, I mentioned about 1.5 years ago, and they sent me a system to review. At the time, I think I had maybe 500 subscribers. So very small YouTube channel, especially as far as sponsors or anything like that goes. That's one of the things that I love about the company. They actually support and use small channels to advertise. That's kind of a great thing that most companies don't do. Ever since I got the system, it's what I use. End of story. I've used it every day for 1.5 years. Every day I painted. I know I've mentioned before about the cups. Look at this, guys. You are not going to mix up your drinking cup and your paint water. It's not gonna happen. You're go to reach for this and you're not gonna take a drink. You're gonna catch yourself ahead of time. These brush holders that hold the brushes in the correct position, amazing. That's going to keep your brushes having your tip longer and make them last. When you put the brush the other way, a lot of us use paint cups like this, where you just put the brushes in, and what happens is as the brush is drying, all that water seeps down into the ferrule and loses their point. And that's what happened with all of these. These are all my old brushes from when I first started painting and didn't know how to care for my brushes. You can see there's quite a few of them. I really like getting new brushes. This paper on the wet palette, I know. I'm doing a video about why wet palettes are bad, but let's be honest, I love my wet palette. It's not going away. I love this paper. It actually allows just enough water in to thin my paints properly within a few minutes and not get totally destroyed by the end of the painting session. It is fantastic. I have Masters one. I have the Red Grass. I have the Red Grass Travel one. So I've used quite a few different wet palettes. This one and this paper in particular is my favorite. And the storage system and be able to take it on the go. If you don't have a dedicated storage space, you need this, and keeps all your stuff stored. When I went on a cruise, I was gonna be gone for a week, and guys, I can't go a week without painting. I'm kind of a little addicted to painting. So I took this kit with me. I had the brushes inside, I had paints inside, I had minis inside. Put this in the box it came in, and boom, there you go. I had everything I needed, and I actually painted a mini on a boat. This system is absolutely great. If you want to get your own, there is an affiliate link in the description below, and you can also use my coupon code, which is on the screen right now, and that will get you an extra 15% off. System's going to save you space, save you money, allow you to paint on the go, so many benefits for it, and you get 15% off. But wait, there's more. And that is because Crydrufi is also sponsoring a giveaway. So we are going to be giving away 1 deluxe system and 1 regular system. What you're seeing here is the regular system. I technically have the deluxe version, but the other 2 palettes are in my travel pack. I don't usually take this part myself when I'm just going to a hobby hangout. If it's not a big trip, I don't take the whole thing. The deluxe version comes with an extra well palette and wet palette. So that's what's in my travel pack, is those other two. But this whole system right here, we're giving away 2 of them. So ready? Here's how you enter. What you want to do is subscribe to the channel. Sorry, shameless plug, have to do it. If you go to the channel page and click on the communities tab, you can now post to the community in YouTube. So the Mandy's Minis community, and in there is going to be the information for the contest, and you'll upload a photo of your current workstation. Everyone who does so will get entered into a drawing, and we are going to pull 2 winners randomly on a live stream that you can see both here and on our new Twitch channel. So also announcing, guess what? Mandy's Minis is going to Twitch. So a lot of big changes, a lot of big announcements in this video. If you want to win your own quadruffy, head over to Mandy's Minis community tab and upload your photo. All right, that's going to be it for this one. I again want to thank Quadruffy for sponsoring this video, as well as our contest. Don't forget to enter. Go to our YouTube page, upload a photo of your current work area where you're currently painting, and 2 winners will be drawn at random. To get your own Quadruffy, use the link in the description below and my code to save you 15% off. Thank you so much again for watching this video. I really appreciate you guys. I love hearing your comments, and I am always going to be here for you. So thank you to our patrons. We absolutely love the support that you give us, and it's a growing community, so it's been a lot of fun, and thank you all so much. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to enter and get your quadruffy. Until next time, have fun and keep creating.